new downwind boards from Armstrong. Frothing to check these out. I haven't ridden anything. These are my first impressions of them. Haven't even looked at them. So you got the ocean model, as it sounds, kind of going to be the narrower, longer guys doing the big missions, fast foils, and then they're just standard downwind board, which is the Mark III. Crazy to think that we're already up to a 30 duration, but let's unbox them. Let's have a look. Both 95 litres, so I think it'll be a good comparison. So yeah, let's have a look. Absolutely loving the new packaging. Way less plastic, which I'm all for. Put this in the compost. Frothing. It's a big upgrade. Ooh. New little detail. Ooh. First couple things, before they had these blue markings on the pad itself where you could see where your foot was relative to the track. So these are the tracks. Now that's actually a cutout, so you can feel it more. The other thing is the main arch bar is a much smoother. It's not as sharp. And I kind of found that like when I was moving my foot across, I was getting kind of stuck because it was quite a sort of narrow, sharp ridge. This is much more smooth and rounded. So pad also looks a bit longer too. So yeah. And also some cutouts throughout up on the deck here, which I quite like. Gives you a little bit more grip, a little bit more feedback, a little bit lighter. Love it. Pulled in tail looks very much like the, it's got a lot of features to the mid-length. A little bit more rocker through the back, a little bit sharper for a little bit longer. So yeah, loving the look of that. That looks beautiful. But then also these rails, got some glistening to them. They look beautiful. All right, let's have a look at the Downwind Performance. Oh, sorry, no, it's not Downwind Performance anymore. This is the Ocean. Oh yeah. I'm gonna say a little more rocker, just up through the nose. Generally, just the whole board feels like a little bit more rocker, which, especially with touchdowns, trying to work the board up, having a long, flat board, nose was you sort of touch down, bury in a bit, but this looks much more gradual rocker throughout the whole board. Loving the look of that. Man, that looks beautiful. Same thing, that long pintail just looks like a canoe almost. That kind of looks like it just cut through the water beautifully, released nicely. So the other thing I'm just noticing is how wide the pad goes on your front foot. Quite often with these narrow boards, you find yourself almost standing on the rail. So having quite a sharp top edge to the rail, which these have always had, just means you can stand right over on the edge and still get that leverage force that you're used to. But they've added the pad a bit further out wide, so that looks beautiful. Feels fairly light though. I'm gonna say lighter than last year's model, which lighter, I love lighter. So look, both look beautiful. Let's get rid of this one. We've got to ride them. So I got wind this afternoon, perfect timing. Gonna try to do one run on each setup. See how they feel, see how they paddle up, see how they ride, what are the kind of differences, and give you a wrap up after that. But so far, boards are looking, just little details that have really refined, and I love the black rails too. Something, just add that kind of surfboard feel to it in my opinion, just the look of it anyway. But yeah, already loving the look of that new arch bar, a little bit rounded, cut out. Yeah, all looks epic. So, alrighty, got to get them in the water and test these babies out. This is my first run now, comparing the shorter board, which is the Mark III, and the next run I'll do on the Ocean board. You test that back to back, same literage, different dimensions. I'm gonna talk about the pros and cons. Okay, so setup. I'm running the same setup on both boards. I've got the mast position at 11. I usually ride my downwind boards really far forward. I like the feeling of having less board out in front, so that's just where I ride it. So gonna keep it consistent on both boards. I've got the 685 Downwind Performance foil on the front with a 140 tail on the back. Red shim, that's kind of my standard, what I always ride. And then 795 mast.
I normally like prone, towing, everything else, I ride the 865 mast, but a 795, a little bit quicker for downwinding, but also I find with that extra thickness in the board, visually and with my peripherals, I find it's about the same height from how high my feet are to when I breach. So I find it a little more intuitive to ride the 795 for downwinding. The other thing, got the medium Foil X paddle. I usually actually run a large, but I was curious to go to a medium, see how the higher cadence felt. It actually felt nice getting started to get on foil. And also I run it just at about eyebrow or middle of my forehead height. That's kind of where I run my paddle. So feels like the best of both worlds. It's got a lot of power, but doesn't also hurt the shoulders. But just requires a bit of a faster cadence to get it up on foil. So that's all we're running. Next lap will be on the Downwind Performance. Oh no, it's called the Ocean Board. And we'll see how that goes comparatively. Some interesting initial feel. So I'm starting with that 611. First thing was it's got much duller rails out towards the back of the board here. They're much more rounded and soft, got some curve in them. What I found with that, which was interesting, when a wave hits you and you're a little crossed up, your balance isn't perfect. With the sharper rails in the back, the board can track in a certain direction, whichever directions it's currently kind of lined up. With the softer rails, I could kind of muscle it and twist it a little easier. Felt a little bit more forgiving just when that initial push happens. You didn't have to be perfectly weighted, lined up. So just a bit more forgiving, but still got great release. The other thing was the rocker. Having so much nose rocker and tail rocker, a little bit extra, just meant that when I was touching down and working the board up on foil, those touchdowns, I was touching down more between my feet, which actually just made it a lot easier to get up. When you have such a long flat rocker, your nose often touches down first, and it just means that you kind of bog and kind of, because all your weight's behind that touchdown point, your weight shoots out forward and you kind of either nosedive and fall off or just kind of bog and lose a lot of speed. So that increase in rocker, for me anyway, really felt nice. I felt easy to actually work the board up, even though this is a smaller board. So yeah, look, the 611, immediately, it feels surfy. It wants to turn. I've got a lot more room to move on the board, having that little bit extra width, a little bit more stability paddling. I jumped on the board, never got wet. Felt really nice just to paddle, a bit more stable and forgiving. So yeah, I will have to jump on the bigger board for the next run, get a feel for how they compared paddling up. Look, I can only imagine the bigger board's gonna be easier to paddle up, but I think this one will just feel a little bit more surfy. So yeah, definitely some improvements. Can really feel those softer rails and that little bit more rocker particularly. So yeah, it's broth. And also that arch bar, much more gradual, doesn't create a pressure point underneath your heel or anything, just feels much more shaped to the arch of your foot. So the little details, they all make the difference. So no, this thing's feeling really good. Whew. Just so surfy. It's still able to chase down those bumps. Woo! Kind of running out of daylight, but we're up. We're on the 7.8 Ocean model. It is insane how much easier or how much more glide the board has for catching bumps. It is definitely less stable on the roll when you're paddling, but then it's much more stable nose up, nose down. It just, as the bump lifts up, the board doesn't nosedive as much. So definitely not as, unstable in one aspect, more stable in the other. So again, a little bit extra rocker, really helped with the paddle up, feel a little more, touchdowns are a little better. I can definitely feel this board being a bit longer, it's a little slower to respond. So you get quick pumps, you're a lot more weight out in front, everything's a little slower, a little more delayed. So, a little more smooth on the pitch, I'd say. But if you're trying to pump out of a hole, definitely not as responsive and reactive. So if I wanted to do turns and cruise downwind, I think I'd go for that Downwind Mark III. If I want to race, paddle up small foils, this is the one. And that's it. If you're not even getting on foil, this is easier to get on foil. So if your biggest concern is just getting up, or if you want to ride out in the ocean, small foils on the big ocean lumps, this is the board. But if you want something that's a bit more all-round, it can wing it in light wind, you can surf foil it, you know, still downwind it and all that, then that Mark III is probably the one. So look, pros and cons to each. I'm kind of happy to have both actually and use it a bit more, but yeah, look, just another board to unfortunately add to the quiver. But look, both boards will get you out downwinding, both totally capable. So yeah, just my thoughts. I think I've pretty much run out of light, so perfect timing. You.